谢谢总统刚才的演讲。下面请北京大学的师生对总统的演讲发表评论和提问，和总统先生进行交流。时间大约在20分钟左右。That's your choice.
Yes. Yes.
总统先生你好，我是北京大学艺术学系3年级的学生，很高兴我成为了今天第一个向您提问的北大学生。就像您刚刚演讲中所说的那样，中美人民应该携手起来，共同前进。而且这中间的最主要的环节，就像您刚刚说的一样，就是我们要互相交流了解。在我看来，自从中国的改革开放以来，中国人民对于美国的文化、历史、人物有了很多的了解。从克林顿总统您来说，从克林顿总统自己来说，我们已经知道了很多关于您自己的事情。从华盛顿总统、林肯总统，还有独立战争、南北战争，从可口可乐、微软，一直到刚刚在我们面前沉没的 Titanic。但是，美国人民对于中国人民的了解，我觉得却似乎并不是那么多。可能他们仅仅是从几部反映中国农村和文革的影片来看待中国，但那并不是现在真正的中国。我想请问您，就是您作为10年来第一个访问中国的美国总统，您将采取什么措施来促进两国人民真正的相互了解、相互尊重？谢谢。
Well, first of all, I think that's a very good point. And one of the reasons that I came here was to try to, because as you can see, a few people come with me from the news media. I hope that my trip would help to show a full and balanced picture of modern China to the United States. And that by coming here, it would encourage others to come here and others to participate in the life of China. I see a young man out in the audience who introduced himself to me yesterday as the first American ever to be a law student in China. So I hope we will have many more Americans coming here to study, many more Americans coming here to be tourists, many more Americans coming here to do business. The First Lady this morning and the Secretary of State had a meeting on a legal project. We are doing a lot of projects together with the Chinese to help promote the rule of law. That should bring a lot more people here. I think there is no easy answer to your question. It's something we have to work at. We just need more people involved in more kinds of contacts. And I think the more we can do that, the better. Is there another question from the Chinese? Yes. Anybody here? I'll just try to get them all. Go ahead. Why don't both of you just pass the microphone down? We have the gentleman in the tie, and then the gentleman in the yellow shirt, and the gentleman in the T-shirt. Go ahead.
总统先生，我是力学与工程科学系97级的本科生。总统先生你好，我作为一名中国人，我很关心祖国的统一问题。在台湾问题上，自1972年尼克松总统访华以来，已经取得了很大的进展。但是我们仍然失望地看到，美国人不断地向台湾出售先进的武器，美国人不断地派军舰进入了台湾海峡。更令我们气愤的是，美国和日本又签订了新安保条约。对此，据日本某些高级官员表示了，他们居然把他们法律范围包括了我们的台湾省。对此，我们不禁要问：如果中国也向夏威夷出售武器，如果中国也派军舰进入了夏威夷，如果中国也和其他国家签订了安保条约，把夏威夷包括在我们的法律范围内，请问克林顿先生，您会同意吗？请问美国2亿人民会同意吗？谢谢。
Well, first of all, the United States policy is not an obstacle to the peaceful reunification of China and Taiwan. Our policy is embodied in the 3 communiques and in the Taiwan Relations Act. Our country recognized China and embraced a one China policy almost 20 years ago. And I reaffirmed our one China policy to President Jiang in our meetings. Now, when the United States and China reached agreement that we would have a one China policy, we also reached agreement that the reunification would occur by peaceful means. And we have encouraged the cross-strait dialogue to achieve that. Our policy is that any weapons sales, therefore, to Taiwan must be for defensive purposes only, and that the country must not believe, China must not believe, that we are in any way trying to undermine our own one China policy. It is our policy. But we do believe it should occur, any reunification should occur peacefully. Now, on Japan, if you read the security agreement we signed with Japan, I think it will be clear from its terms that the agreement is not directed against any country, but rather in support of stability in Asia. We have forces in South Korea that are designed to deter a resumption of the Korean War across the dividing line between the two Koreas. Our forces in Japan are largely designed to help us to promote stability anywhere in the Asia-Pacific region on short notice. But I believe that it is not fair to say that either Japan or the United States have a security relationship that is designed to contain China. Indeed, what both countries want is a security partnership with China for the 21st century. Just as, for example, you mentioned NATO. We have expanded NATO in Europe, but we also have made a treaty, an agreement between NATO and Russia to prove that we are not against Russia anymore. And the most important thing NATO has done in the last 5 years is to work side by side with Russia to end the war in Bosnia. And I predict to you that what you see us doing with China now, working together to try to limit the tension from the Indian and the Pakistani nuclear tests, you will see more and more and more of that in the future. And I think you will see a lot of security cooperation in that area. And we can't see the agreements of today through the mirror of yesterday's conflicts. Yes, the gentleman in the T-shirt there. Okay.
总统先生，我是北京大学97级的硕士生，很高兴今天能有机会向你提问。你带着友好的微笑踏上了中国的土地，来到了北大的校园，我们都非常激动。中国人民都非常渴望友谊，尤其渴望建立在平等基础上的中美友谊。据我们所知，在你来中国之前，你在国内曾经表示，之所以去中国，是因为它太重要了，接触是最好的压制方式。我想问你，你这句话是为了使这次访华成行而向反对派做出的承诺呢，还是此刻站在讲台上的你微笑的背后，还藏着真正的带有压制的初衷呢？请总统先生正面回答我的问题。
Well, if I did, I would mask it behind a smile. But I don't. That is, my words mean exactly what they say. We have to make a decision. All of us do, but especially the people who live in large nations with great influence must decide how to define their greatness. When the Soviet Union went away, Russia had to decide how to define its greatness. Would they attempt to develop the human capacity of the Russian people? and work in partnership with their neighbors for a greater future? Or would they remember the bad things that happened to them in the past 200 years and think the only way they could be great would be to dominate their neighbors militarily? They chose a forward course. The world's a better place. The same thing is true with China. You will have to decide, both in terms of your policies within your country and beyond, what does it mean that China will be a great power in the 21st century? Does it mean that you will have enormous economic success? Does it mean you will have enormous cultural influence? Does it mean that you will be able to play a large role in solving the problems of the world? Or does it mean you will be able to dominate your neighbors in some form or fashion, whether they like it or not? This is a decision that every great country has to make. You ask me, do I really want to contain China? The answer is no. If you look at the American people have always had a very warm feeling toward China that has been interrupted from time to time when we have had problems. But if you go back through the history of our country, there's always been a feeling on the part of our people that we ought to be close to the Chinese people. And I believe that it would be far better for the people of the United States to have a partnership on equal, respectful terms with China in the 21st century than to have to spend enormous amounts of time and money trying to contain China because we disagree with what's going on beyond our borders. I think it would. So I do not want that. I want a partnership. I'm not hiding another design behind a smile. It's what I really believe. I believe it's not because I think it's good for the American people. And it's my job to do what's good for them. What's good for them is to have a good relationship with you. There were some questions back here in the back. Oh, this gentleman. I promised the gentleman in the suit he could be next here. And then we'll go up the aisle here, back there. We can start with this lady in the red T-shirt there and go up the aisle. You had your hand up, didn't you?
总统先生，我是政治学与行政管理系98届的毕业生，也就今年毕业。今年毕业我去中国银行工作。刚才听了总统先生对中美两国青年一代对于这个未来的国际安全，还有环境保护以及金融稳定方面所负有的责任，这个我很受鼓舞，并且我也知道，青年一代如果要担负起这责任的话，首先应该受到良好的教育。我知道总统先生非常喜爱他的女儿，并且他的女儿切尔西就在斯坦福读书。那么我想请问两个问题。第一呢是那个总统先生认为就是总统先生前几年就提出来知识经济的概念。那么总统先生认为高等教育在今后的知识经济的发展中起什么样作用？第二，总统先生对我们青年代，包括中美两国的青年有什么具体的期望，以及认为这个青年应该具备哪些方面的素质？谢谢。
Let me answer the knowledge economy question first. And let me answer by telling you what I have tried to do in the United States. I have tried to create a situation in America in which the doors of universities and colleges are open to every young person who has sufficient academic achievement to get in, that there are no financial burdens of any kind. And we have not completely achieved it, but we have made a great deal of progress. Now, why would I do that? Because I believe that the more advanced an economy becomes, the more important it is to have a higher and higher and higher percentage of people with a university education. Let me just tell you how important it is in the United States. We count our people. You know, every 10 years we do a census, and we count the numbers of the American people, and we get all kinds of information on them. In the 1990 census, younger Americans who had a college degree were overwhelmingly likely to get good jobs and have their incomes grow. Younger Americans who had 2 years or more of university were likely to get good jobs and have their incomes grow. Younger Americans who didn't go to university at all were likely to get jobs where their incomes declined and were much more likely to be unemployed. And the more advanced China's economy becomes, the more that will be true of China. The more you will need very large numbers of people getting university education and technical education. So I think it is very, very important. Now, let me say one expectation I have for the younger generation of Americans and Chinese that has nothing to do with economics. One of the biggest threats to your future is a world which is dominated not by modern problems, but by ancient hatreds. Look around the world and see how much trouble is being caused by people who dislike each other because of their racial or their religious or their ethnic differences. That whether it's in Bosnia or the conflict between the Indians and the Pakistanis, or in the Middle East, or the tribal conflicts in Africa, you look all over the world, you see these kind of problems. Young people, I think, are naturally more open to others who are different, more interested in people who are different. And I hope young people in China and young people in America who have good education will be a strong voice in the world against giving in to this sort of hating people or looking down on them simply because they're different. Thank you.
总统先生，关于民主、自由和人权的问题是中美两国人民都很关注的问题。但是坦率地说，在这方面咱们两个国家有不少分歧。您刚才在您的演讲中对美国的建设民主自由的历史做了一个比较自豪的回顾，而且对中国人民也发表了一些比较建设性的意见。对于真诚的意见，我们当然非常欢迎。但是我同时又想到了一句老话。我想中国人民和世界人民都应该把它作为行动的准则，那就是批评和自我批评同在。如果我现在想问您一下，美国近些年，就是美国当前在人权和民主问题方面，是不是也有一些问题呢？您能不能给我们讲一下您的国家在这方面有哪些不足？您的政府在近期内做过哪些政策，有什么效果？谢谢。
Yes, I do. I do, and first of all, let me say, I never raise this question overseas in any country, not just China, without acknowledging first that our country has had terrible problems in this area. Keep in mind, slavery was legal in America for many years, and that we are still not perfect. I always say that because I don't think it's right for any person to claim that he or she lives in a perfect country. We're all struggling toward ideals to live a better life. So I agree with the general point you made. Now, I will give you two examples. We still have some instances of discrimination in America in housing or employment or other areas based on race. And we have a system set up to deal with it, but we have not totally eliminated it. And in the last year, I have been engaging the American people in a conversation on this subject. And we have tried to identify the things that government should do, the things that the American people should do either through the local government or through other organizations, and the attitudes that should change the minds and hearts of the American people. So that's one example. Now let me give you another example. When I ran for president in 1992, I was in a hotel in New York City, and an American immigrant from Greece came up to me, and he said, "My son is 10 years old, and he studies the election in the schools, and he says I should vote for you. But he said, if I vote for you, I want you to make my son free, because my son is not really free. So I asked this man, what do you mean? And he said, well, the crime is so high in my neighborhood, there are so many guns and gangs, that my son does not feel that I can't let him walk to school by himself or go across the street to play in the park. So if I vote for you, I want you to make my son free. I think that's important because, you see, in America, we tend to view freedom as the freedom from government abuse or from government control. That is our heritage. Our founders came here to escape the monarchy in England. But sometimes freedom requires affirmative steps by government to give everyone an equal opportunity to have an education and make a decent living and to preserve a lawful environment. So I have worked very hard to try to bring the crime rate down in America, and it's now lower than it has been at any time in 25 years, which means that more of our children are free. But the crime rate is still too high. There's still too much violence. So we Americans need to be sensitive not only to preserve the freedoms that we hold dear, but also to create an environment in which people can build a truly good and free life. That's a good question.
校的校长蔡元培先生还说过一句话，他说：“道并行而不相悖，万物并育而不相害。”我并不认为为国家的自由就一定，国家的自由和自己的自由有什么冲突？不是说为了国家的自由就一定要牺牲自己的自由。我认为自由是自己的一种主动的选择，认为是对你最好的、最适合自己的情况。像中国现在繁荣的发展，正是我国人民自由的选择、主动的贡献他们力量的结果。我想自由定义应该是为了真理和正义，还有选择那些最适合自己的情况的一种路。不知道您是否同意我的观点？另外我想最后说一句，只有真正懂得自由的人才会更加尊重别人的自由。谢谢。
I agree with that. No, I do agree with that. I agree, first of all, if you believe in freedom, you have to respect the freedom of others to make another choice. And even societies that have rather radical views of individual freedom recognize limits on that freedom when it interferes with preserving other people's rights. For example, there's one of our famous court cases which says we have freedom of speech, but no one should be free to shout the word fire in a crowded movie theater where there is no fire and cause people to stampede over each other. And there's another famous court decision which says my freedom ends where the other person's nose begins, meaning that you don't have the freedom to hit someone else. So I agree with that. People have the freedom to choose, and you have to respect other people's freedoms, and they have the right to make decisions that are different from yours. And there will never be a time when our systems and our cultures and our choices will be completely identical. That's one of the things that makes life interesting. Want to take one more?
Last. 最后一个问题。
Want to take one more? Go ahead.
总统先生，我想向你提两个问题。第一个问题是，美国经济持续80多个月以来，一直都是非常高速的在增长。我想请问总统先生，这个除了您个人的对美国所做出的贡献以外，请问还有哪些方面，是美国经济成功的主要因素？或许这些对于中国也是一个很好的借鉴。第二个问题是，我想问总统先生。当去年中国主席江泽民在哈佛大学访问的时候，在外面有很多的学生在游行。那么我想请问总统先生，如果今天您到北大来，外面也有中国北大的学生在外面游行的话，请问您有何感想？谢谢。
Well, first of all, on the United States economy, I believe that the principal role of government policy since I've been president was to, first of all, get our big government deficit. We had a huge annual deficit in spending. We got that under control. We're about to have the first balanced budget in 30 years. That drove interest rates down and freed up a lot of money to be invested in creating jobs in the private sector. Then the second thing we did was to expand trade a lot. So we began to sell a lot more around the world than we had before. And the third thing we did was to attempt to invest more in our people, in research, development, technology, and education. Now, in addition to that, however, a lot of the credit here goes to the American people themselves. We have a very sophisticated business community. They were investing money in new technologies and in new markets and in training people. We have an environment where it's quite easy for people to start a business, and perhaps this is the area that might be most helpful to China. I know that my wife has done a lot of work around the world in villages, trying to get credit to villagers so they could borrow money to start their own businesses, to try to take advantage of some skill they have. And we have seen this system work even in the poorest places in Africa and Latin America, where opportunity takes off. So we have tried to make it easy in America for people to start a business, to expand a business, and to do business. And then we have also tried very, very hard to get new opportunities into areas where there were none before. And all these things together, but especially I give most of the credit to the people of my country. After all, a person in my position, we're supposed to have correct policies so that we create a framework within which the American people then create the future. And I think that is basically what has happened. Now, you asked me an interesting question. Actually, I have been demonstrated against quite a lot in the United States. I told President Zhang when he was there I was glad they demonstrated against him so I didn't feel so lonely. What I think is, I'll give you a serious answer. If there were a lot of people demonstrating against me outside, suppose they were demonstrating over the question that the first gentleman asked me. Suppose they said, oh, President Clinton is trying to interfere with the peaceful reunification of China and Taiwan, and he shouldn't be selling them any weapons, whatever. Well, I would try to find out what they were demonstrating against, and then I would ask my host if they minded if I would go over and talk to them, or if they would mind if one or two people from the group of demonstrators could be brought to see me and they could say what is on their minds, and I could answer. Remember what I said before about what Benjamin Franklin said. Our critics are our friends, for they show us our faults. You have asked me some very good questions today that have an element of criticism in them. They have been very helpful to me. They have helped me to understand how what I say is perceived by others, not just in China but around the world. They have helped me to focus on what I can do to be a more effective president for my people and for the things we believe in. And so I feel very good that we have had this interchange, and from my point of view, the questions were far more important than my speech. I never learn anything when I'm talking. I only learn things when I'm listening. Thank you very much. Thank you.